I always want to say that I'm a completely different person, but I don't think that that's accurate. It's kind of like if you were to see the Statue of Liberty in its original copper, it's not a completely different statue. It's the same thing. It's just years and years of oxidation and rust and dirt and grime that's been scraped off. And you're finally seeing the original shiny, beautiful copper again.
Welcome to the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacey Phillips. As a leading manifestation advisor with a process that's, radically different from the old New Age model, mine is rooted in psychology, neuroscience, and my energetic gifts. I created this podcast to help you expand your subconscious limiting beliefs about the potential of deserving the manifestations you're calling in. Therefore, you're tuning into this podcast series to show your subconscious that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, you've already started the process of manifesting it. Welcome back to another process episode, which is where we showcase one of our pathway members who have gone on to manifest something extraordinary or big within their life. May it be career, home, relationship, financial. This has become one of your favorite podcast segments that we have, as we can tell by the numbers. And one commonality that I want to make that you'll begin to recognize each of these pathway members share in common from past episodes to new is that not one of them simply dipped their feet into the work or flirted with it. They went all in. I've been able to see this recently with my dad who's doing the work and Max kind of flirting with the work and doing it. They sort of touch in, don't really do the DIs, do it once in a while, skip around the workshops without finishing them. Whereas what you'll listen to with each of these episodes, these are the people that started with how to manifest, moved into shadow, moved into inner child, did all of the workshops, listened to every one of the supported classes, which is our once a month class where Jessica and I go through in the pathway answering members' questions. And then they've gone on to listen to every podcast episode. That's what you will hear from each of the pathway members that we share on this. And not because we're only picking people who do that, the ones who actually manifest the big things, they go all in. And not only that, but once they've gone through the work, and they get a baseline of it, they make it their own. So a past guest, Heather Whitaker, you heard that in the Deep Imaginings, she started out with them, listening to them, and they weren't as effective to her. So she figured out her own process that when she walks on hikes, she talks the prompts aloud. So she'll listen to them in her earbuds. Once she's heard the prompts, she then goes and talks out what's been prompted until she gets to the block, and then she reprograms it. And you have to imagine, even as you're walking and listening, you're in a hypnotic state because your brain, your conscious mind isn't flying around. You've now gone into an alpha or a theta. So that's what you'll also find in commonality with these members. They make it their own. They don't stop when they get a roadblock. They actually figure out their own way through it. Today will be no exception. So I'm going to kick it over to my co-host, Jessica Gill, who you've heard on the Explained episodes and the Process episodes, as she highlights another really exciting member within the pathway and how they've gone on to manifest something extraordinary.
Hello everyone, Jessica here. Welcome back to another episode of The Process. Today we welcome fellow pathway member Hiwa Alaghebandian. Hiwa shares her journey of manifesting clarity around her dream career and then launching it. She moved from a very corporate position to creating something that was more authentic to herself. She also shares how she began this work fresh in the depths of a heartbreak and how she shifted her list from wanting to manifest her partner back to the clarity that her partner was actually no longer what she truly desired and that she could show up for herself in the ways that she was looking for in a partner. Most importantly, the work has helped Hiwa reconnect to her true, authentic self. I am so excited to be sharing this episode with you guys. This is one that Hiwa and I actually recorded early on in 2020. And even since we've recorded, she's gone on to manifest even more. I know you guys will take so much away from this episode. She truly is very expansive and really digs into some of the blocks that were holding her back and looping, and how she moved through them and processed through all of those painful memories. So without further ado, here is the episode with Hiwa. Welcome back to another episode of Expanded, and we have a process episode today with Hiwa. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this.
Yeah, obviously you're familiar with the podcast and the format and all of that. So why don't you fill us in on what your cultural background and upbringing is?
So my parents are from Iran. They moved to Germany shortly before I was born. I actually think my mom was pregnant with me when they moved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they moved to Hamburg and I was born there. I lived there until I was 11. And then we moved to Northern Virginia, like outside of Washington, D.C.
How was all of the transitions of moving and living in different countries and all of that?
You know, it was pretty traumatic at the time when I was a child. You know, looking different, having, you know, a weird foreign name, things like that definitely made it difficult. There's a lot of tension in Germany with Turkish people. You know, Iranian people look a lot like Turkish people. So that was always a bit of a challenge. My first day of either preschool or kindergarten, whatever comes first, the first German words I learned were "go home, foreigner."
Wow.
So, you know, yeah, like I came home really excited and I was like, Mom, look, I learned some German words. And she was like, oh, God, okay, this is going to be fun.
Is that kind of why they decided to move over to the U.S.?
I think there were multiple reasons. That didn't happen until I was 11. So we stayed for quite a while.
Yeah.
We would come to the U.S. constantly, and my dad had some business in the U.S. The final thing was my brother was starting college in D.C. In Persian culture, at least, you know, my parents' generation, people don't move out of their parents' house until they get married. And so my parents, when I was growing up, were pretty traditional and pretty strict. They've actually changed a lot. I mean, I don't live with my parents and I'm not married, but at the time, they really didn't want him going to college in a different continent. And that was a pretty challenging move too. I had finally, you know, established a group of friends and stuff. And then I moved to the US at this kind of very impressionable time. I had no friends. I was in a very awkward stage of puberty and people would call me ugly a lot.
No.
It was really, yeah.
I've seen your picture. You're stunning.
Really...
So that's just simply not true.
Thank you. I mean, listen, I was kind of awkward looking. I was super hairy, and I, you know, wasn't doing anything about it yet. So a lot of like unibrow jokes, things like that. One thing that I still vividly remember was in the 6th grade when I moved, I was like really into my hair, not because I actually was interested in it, but because I thought that that's what cool, pretty girls did. And so I was brushing my hair on the school bus and this boy said to me very genuinely, like he wasn't trying to be mean or anything. He just very genuinely asked, why are you so obsessed with your hair when you're so ugly overall?
Oh my God.
I know. So, and like he truly wasn't trying to be mean. He was just curious to know the answer. Yeah, so it was definitely some rough times.
It's so crazy too, because how beauty standards sort of shift, and now like having your hair natural and not shaving your legs is like more in and more accepted. And it's like, where was that when I was going through puberty? Like that would have been amazing.
Or, you know, where were the Kardashians?
Yeah.
Where were, you know, all of these like different looking girls with different looking bodies? We didn't have any of that. I used to, when I was a little kid, literally pray to be blonde haired and blue eyed because I thought that was the only way I could be pretty. And of course, like I thought the only way I could have love or anything that I wanted was to be pretty because it was a different time for women. I think women really were only valued for being attractive.
It's interesting to, I think women and men too, or any gender for that matter, kind of pick up programming around beauty so harshly as part of their identity from so young. And even now, like I'm 30 as well, and there's so much blocks constantly where I'm like having to go back in and do a DI on it and like, oh damn, where did I pick up that that's how I was supposed to look, or this part of it? There's so many layers to it, so complex, and so many microscopic ways I think that society sort of mirrors back to us that we should be X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
I guess kind of transitioning from all of these blocks that you had to work through, how did you discover Lacey's work?
So it was a little bit over a year ago. I was freshly out of a relationship. Like it had been less than a month. And I mean, I was beyond heartbroken. This was the first person I dated in any capacity in 7 years. And just the way everything had happened, it really felt like I was manifesting the relationship. Pretty much everything I would say would unfold exactly the way I said it.
Wow.
Like it really was kind of almost creepy. And so to me, I was like, well, there's all these signs we're definitely meant to be. So when that relationship ended, it really rocked me. You know, it felt like it was my fault. Like I'd picked a fight with him. And so I had all this guilt and shame over how I had behaved and felt like I'd lost this relationship that I thought was supposed to be because of how it kept unfolding. And so I was just beyond heartbroken. And was overloading on all of these like self-help things. And like, I mean, just constantly listening to like Taroscope videos on YouTube in hopes that they would like say something that would bring us back together. And I was out on a really long walk with my dog and I just was shuffling through all these different podcasts, and I'm not even sure what podcast I put on that Lacey was a guest on. And then I went to Expanded. It was one of the episodes that was a supported episode that they put out on Expanded. So it was Lila and Lacey answering questions. And I knew nothing about Lacey's work or who she was or anything like that. But I just remember listening to her, and the questions didn't even fully make sense to me, like all this terminology that I didn't know. But there were a few, as she was answering everything she said, I was like, this makes perfect sense. Like she kept talking about the subconscious. And I was like, of course, I've been talking about for years how the subconscious really runs the show. Everything she said resonated. But the one question I kept having, which is the question that I have with everything that everyone says in this space, is, okay, but how? Like, okay, you say that we manifest from our subconscious. Well, then how do I change my subconscious? And I find that most people don't actually answer that question. They never have the how. They just have, the what or the why. But then she went on to say, and, in the DRE and the DI, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, damn, like she actually has the how too. Yeah. Like I did not see that coming. So I went home and I immediately signed up for the pathway. Like I didn't even think about it twice. And I remember it was a Saturday morning. So I had all weekend, which I would have otherwise spent like crying and obsessing. Yeah. And I just went through everything. Like I immediately did the Formula in Magnetism Now, how to manifest. And then I just went through them. I was looking for a way to feel okay with the heartbreak, which in my mind was to get back together. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my career. And I felt like that really contributed to the breakup because I had nothing that I was really excited about in my life other than this one relationship. And so I really wanted to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I really wanted to, quote unquote, heal myself so that I could be capable of being in this type of relationship. So in the beginning, I just overdosed on the work. Like I would do it nonstop. It was the only thing that like gave me a sense of control over my life.
I think that's such a cool remedy too for breakups, because I think when people face breakups, there's this phase, especially if you really didn't want to leave the relationship or didn't want to end it or any of that part of it, you're kind of rock bottomed out and you need a new sense of what is my normal life, and you want to attach back to that old relationship because that's so comfortable. But I think when you can transform the end of a relationship into a time to go inward and self-reflect, you almost bring hope back. And I think that's one of the biggest remedies for heartbreak, is hope that like, wow, things can be different. Things can be better. You know, it doesn't have to go back to exactly what it was. Where was I not honoring myself? Where was I not showing up for myself? Because it wasn't just this relationship. There was, you know, a variety of ways in which I wasn't being there for myself. So I think that's so cool you were able to find this at that time period.
I'm so grateful for that relationship and that breakup, because I say that it taught me a lot, but it's not like he taught me a lot at all. I learned a lot as the result of being in that relationship. Yeah. And a lot of that really comes from finding Lacey's work. You know, I always want to say that it completely changed me or I'm a completely different person, but I don't think that that's accurate. It's kind of like if you were to see the Statue of Liberty in its original copper, it's not a completely different statue. It's the same thing. It's just years and years of oxidation and rust and dirt and grime that's been scraped off. And you're finally seeing the original, shiny, beautiful copper again.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, so that's really what it feels like for me. And every day I find myself, you know, just polishing it up a little bit more, like finding new areas where I can do more work.
What workshop, when you did it, you were like, holy crap, I need this right now?
So when I did it, I first did formula and magnetism or how to manifest to get a sense of everything. And then I think I did opulence after that, because in my mind, I thought that if I figure out what I want to do for a career, that'll like that's a prerequisite for us getting back together. So I would not recommend doing opulence first. It was not the right thing. But then after that, I went and I did inner child, which was just so transformational. And I've done inner child. I actually have no idea how many times, like maybe 20 times, maybe more. Like I do it really all the time.
Yeah. When you would go back, so if you're doing inner child 20 times, right, let's say, are you taking through the same scenario each time? Or like sometimes for me, I will go through a general sense every so often as like a tune-up, but then I'll go through with a very specific thing that I'm like, oh, I picked this up a lot during childhood, and I'm going to go back through with like trust and being able to trust my surroundings, caretakers, myself, etc. And with that one theme, look at every single day of the workshop through that lens of like, how did this impact how I trust the world around me? Do you ever do anything like that?
I love that. I don't do exactly that. I do something a little bit similar, I guess. So I've done it just generally just gone in with no specific intentions, but then I've done it with, for example, I for a while really wanted expansion around a household where the mother is working and the father is mainly stay at home and supporting. Not that that's necessarily what I want for myself in life, but I just wanted to see more women in power and really supportive men who were just very nurturing and kind. So I did reparent a few times with, actually, this is kind of funny, Lisa Bonet and Lenny Kravitz as my magnetic parents.
Amazing.
And and she was just really like artsy and out there in the world and bohemian, and he would stay home with us more and, take care of everything and really support her in her career.
Yeah.
I've done it a few times where I've taken through like specific experiences that I wanted.
Love that. And I love that you have like the coolest celebrity parents too.
I know they're not even together anymore, but they're so cool.
Oh, that's awesome. So then when you wrote your first list or one of your lists, like what were kind of those items that you were looking to call in or looking to unblock or looking to shift?
So when I first started it, I think the big things that I wanted were career clarity and being able to see and know that I'm capable of being in the type of relationship that I wanted. Those are things that I actually have called in and we can talk about. Yeah. But I also at the same time wrote a lot of physical items on my list, which I'm glad that I did because I think that's an area where I've always been pretty expanded. You know, my parents were always really into buying me stuff that I wanted. So I never felt like, you know, I didn't have a ton of blocks around that. So those were things that I would manifest really quickly early on. And I think it helped me build up my trust muscle. Yeah. I think it's really nice for people to, whatever they're the most expanded in, whatever they've had the most ease with in their entire life, to start with things like that, just so you can see that it works.
Totally agree.
And then, you know, like partnership is a harder thing for me to manifest because, you know, I'm single all the time and, you know, I have more blocks around that. And I just think it's a more complicated thing. Plus, you know, I came into it out of a breakup, and once I even fully accepted that that relationship was over, I was still hurting and I really wanted someone just to fill that void, which is not a place that you manifest from at all. Right. So
it also seemed like you kind of came into it with like, okay, I want to almost like manifest my partner back. And the universe was
100%.
Yeah. The universe was like, we need to not.
I thought I was going to be the story that would like disprove Lacey's, or not disprove, but I'd be like the exception to the rule who like got her ex back. Which is funny because I actually just last night had a dream that he was trying to get back together with me. And I was like, oh yeah, it would be nice to have a boyfriend, but not you. Yeah.
It's a Mercury retrograde vibes. They're sending back all the shadow and everything else to look back at.
Yeah, exactly.
How funny.
But then even my first partnership list, looking back on it now, almost everything that I wanted in a partner was things that I actually wanted for myself, but I was too shadowy to admit that I wanted them for myself.
What are some of those things?
A really big one is to be seen. I can't even tell you how shadowy I was about this. My ex, who, you know, I broke up with before I started the work, was like a tiny bit famous when we were dating. And I now see that what drew me to him was wanting that for myself. Not that I want to be super famous, but I definitely have like a very real need to be seen that I just denied in myself so much. And even once I was starting to see it, I would try to think that, like, oh no, I actually just want external validation. That isn't like an authentic desire to be seen. Like I really tried to fight it for so long. I realized it's because when I was a little kid, I just assumed everyone wanted the spotlight. Like everyone wanted the lead in the play, or everyone wanted this, or everyone wanted that. And you know, not everyone can have the lead in the play. So I thought that I would kind of bow out and let everyone else have what they wanted so that everyone would still like me, so that I'm not taking things away from other people. But, you know, now that I'm an adult, I realize, first of all, not everyone does want these things. But even if they do, nothing really is a zero-sum game. Like we tend to have this mindset where like if you get a bigger piece of the pie, that means I get a smaller piece of the pie. But the pie can just be bigger. Yep. So everyone can have bigger pieces of the pie.
100%.
It took a lot of work around that for me to accept that and own it.
There's a lot of even like cultural shame on like, oh, you just want to be seen from ego or blah, blah, blah. Like celebrities are so full of themselves. There's all this programming that's fed to us even through just like a cultural lens. And then realizing, no, it doesn't have to be from ego. I'm just really excited when I'm seen and like able to share and interact with people in that way. I think that's really beautiful. You were able to kind of nailed down the core of that. And also like you were trying to let others take the spotlight, which is really sweet. But, you know, you can kind of parent that inner child of you. Is that kind of stuff that you worked out in some of the DIs?
Definitely, yes. I would say both through inner child and through shadow. It took a lot of digging, finding roots, reprogramming, and then revisiting.
Yeah.
Another thing that did help me just on the conscious level was digging into my natal chart more. And I have a Leo rising, so that obviously speaks volumes about the need to be seen. And then my sun is in the 10th house, which is that same kind of, I mean, it's Leo's natural house. So I really have that in my chart in so many places. So I think that was a little bit of validation that no, this is really an authentic desire and not just external validation, as I tried to convince myself.
Yeah. And so when you were kind of going in and giving yourself a healing, what does that look like for you? Is it bringing that idea of like, oh, wow, okay, I was operating this way and I don't want to do that anymore? Like, how do you give yourself a healing?
It really depends on the situation. And, you know, I'll give an example, but for things that are difficult, I tend to set an intention to work on it daily for, let's say, a month. It generally never takes that long, but it'll often take 5 or 6 or 7 sessions where I just try different ways to reprogram it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so I can give like a very specific example if that helps.
Definitely. People are always asking like, how do I reprogram and blah, blah, blah. So I think any and all examples of how people do it, because there's no wrong or right way to do it.
I, for a while, was having this trigger pop up constantly where people would misunderstand me. And I would get so frustrated. And so I knew, both based on the fact that I was getting frustrated and the fact that it was just happening all the time, that this must be something I had to work through. So I took it through a DRE and I found a root from when I was really, really little. And I was out shoe shopping with a family friend. Like I was friends with the daughters and our parents were friends. And I made some comment about a pair of shoes that this mom was looking to buy for her daughters. I think I said something like, oh, my mom would never buy that for me. And it came off as, oh, you're an idiot or you have bad taste or something like that. But really what I meant was because I had a really narrow feet and the shoes just wouldn't have worked on my feet. But, you know, it came off poorly and she got really upset with me and like really, really shamed me for it. And I just been carrying this shame all these years that I have a hard time expressing myself to people. If people misunderstand me, it could be dangerous and harmful to me. And so now as an adult, when people misunderstand me, I would get really upset. And so the first way that I tried to reprogram that was by explaining to her what I had actually meant to say, and then having her be like, oh, okay, and we move on. But after I did that, the thing would still happen in my day-to-day life. People would still misunderstand me and I would still get upset. You know, I think that we have this tendency to want to rush the process and we're like, no, I already addressed that. I already reprogrammed that. Like it's over, it's done. But if it's still coming up in your life, then it's not over. It's not done. You still have the subconscious work to do.
Right.
So I went back in and I just kept trying different ways and nothing would stick until one time I had the mom, when I said what I said, I had the mom ask me, oh, what do you mean by that? And I said, oh, because these shoes are really wide and I have such narrow feet, like I can't wear them. And she was like, oh, that's so funny. I thought you meant something completely different. I'm so happy I asked. Because, you know, when you don't ask, then sometimes, you know, there's misunderstandings and everything was fine. No one was shamed. And then as soon as I did that, I just felt this weight lift off my chest and I knew that I'd reprogrammed it.
Oh, so cool.
But whenever I do work through difficult things like that, for good measure, I'll go in again the next day and see if anything comes up at all. If I've actually reprogrammed it, then I'll just have a voice be like, no, this is done. You don't need to worry about it anymore. And then the trigger won't come up in real life anymore. Like since that day, I've never really, maybe people have misunderstood me. I don't know, but it's never been a situation and I've never cared. So
that's amazing. I love that. And then when you feel like you have reprogrammed it, do you have any physical reaction in your body? Like, does your chest feel different? Does your stomach feel different? Do you feel any sensation physically anywhere?
Yes. It's an instant lighter feeling. Like it really feels like a truck has been lifted off of me.
Wow.
That's really, and then like followed kind of by like a warm rush of good feelings.
That's such a cool, clear description of real results on the trigger and knowing like, oh, wow, okay, like this is actually working deep in the subconscious because you can see it on the physical plane, but then you also like have that moment during the healing when your body literally feels different. You're almost vibrating at a different energy frequency at that point.
I still remember my first DRE. I had that exact feeling. And when I came out, I wrote in my journal, I feel like a different person.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really beautiful.
Stories like this just make me so excited and want to shout from the rooftops about Lacey's work because I'm just like, this is so helpful to so many people. Like, I feel like so many people live in these limited, smaller versions of what they can be. And it's really kind of what you were saying earlier of shining off that rust that we get so comfortable living in, and we don't have to be living from that place anymore.
And especially, I think about when I started this, I really thought that because I'd picked a fight with my ex and that's why we broke up, I thought that I had to like really like control my anger and control my temper and really like white knuckle it through life.
Yeah.
But then when I found this work, I realized, no, it can be easy. I just have to figure out what triggers me, what blocks I have, what shadows I haven't integrated. And once I do all that, it's not this difficult process of like having to control yourself or like you can just live in flow because there's nothing there to trigger you. And when there is, you know how to address it.
And it's such like a comforting tool to be able to think, okay, I feel so much dis-ease in my body when I'm triggered about whatever it may be. I have an outlet to go to immediately, like on my phone right away. Like I don't have to wait till my next whatever session or appointment or whatever. I can address it like now if I want to, which I think is so powerful.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
going along in the process, clearly you were doing incredible unblocking. What expanders were you finding?
One of the early ones that I had was Ariel Charnas. Do you know the Something Navy girl?
Oh, yeah. She's like a fashion blogger.
Yeah. Not that I want to be a fashion blogger or anything like that, but she started her blog when she was heartbroken. Her boyfriend broke up with her and she just needed an outlet and she really, I think, said that she wanted to like get him back and wanted to have something she was passionate about. So that's how she started her blog. And it's now grown into this fashion empire. I mean, she has this huge team. They're opening their own store. She has her own line. She created something huge out of nothing. So that was one of my early expanders, and I continue to be very expanded by her. Lacey was one of my early expanders because I knew that I wanted to do something I'd never really seen anything that looked like the type of thing I wanted to do. And so seeing how Lacey kind of created her own path, like she created something that's never existed before, that was very expansive to me.
Yeah.
My parents were big expanders because my parents have changed a lot. You know, I think if my parents were to have kids today, they would raise them very differently than they raised my brother and I. And not that they did anything wrong with my brother and I, but they just have changed so much. You know, my dad used to have a really bad temper. He's calmed down a lot through a lot of conscious work on himself. So, you know, I'm very lucky that I had that expansion. And I think that really affected how I did the work because I knew that people could change. I knew that people could evolve. I knew that people could heal things in themselves because I'd seen it through my parents. So I was very willing to dive into the work right away.
Yeah. And then did you face tests as you were calling in all of these things? And how did sort of those tests show up? Did you have tests with any of like the physical items, or were they more tests for the partnership or the career or the mindset?
Everything. So when I first went through how to manifest, a big thing that struck me was that I've never passed tests historically. Like even with dumb things, like I would want like a certain item of clothing, let's say, I'd find something and be like, oh, this is close enough. I'm never going to find what I want. Or every relationship I've been in really has been a test. Like every single one, when I look back, I'm like, well, I like these things. I really don't like these other things, but Lord knows I'm single for 7 years at a time, so I better settle for this. So that was a big thing I noticed in myself. So, I mean, in the beginning, I'd really play around with the physical items and, you know, I got a few tests and then I got really good at manifesting physical items to the point where I recently wanted a printer and I just randomly found a printer in my building's like garbage area where people sometimes leave things.
Yeah.
But it didn't have a cord. And I looked up, like the cords were like $10. And I remember just being like, universe, I don't want to spend $10 on a power cord for a printer that I don't even know works. If you could just like throw one along my way, that would be great. And I left the house like an hour later to walk my dog, and there was a power cord for that type of printer just sitting dead center on the sidewalk.
What?
Like nothing else around it.
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Just like magic.
Oh my gosh.
So for things like that, I'm not really tested anymore.
Yeah.
What I've gotten a lot of are what I would call trigger tests. So they're like things going wrong in a way that used to make me just lose my shit. Like I would just like start bawling, and feels like kind of like, okay, I'm just going to throw all this shit at you. Are you going to lose your shit, or can you hold yourself and, you know, stay rational through all this? Those were big ones that I got. In partnership, I definitely got a bunch of tests up until a really, really hard one. This guy I met just like randomly on Fifth Avenue, who turns out went to my middle school, high school, and college in Virginia.
Oh.
And we just randomly met.
What?
Yeah, but I didn't know him. He was like 7 or 8 years older than me. So we weren't ever in school at the same time. His parents live like 5 minutes away from my parents. I've never in my entire life been so attracted to someone ever to this day, which I would imagine is some kind of trauma bond. I just didn't stick around long enough to find out what it was. I pulled a 2 of cards for him, all these things. It was such a hard test, especially when I think about the last relationship and how there were all these things that I thought were signs that we were supposed to be together.
Wait, so why did you decide that he wasn't the right partner? Like, was he missing things on your list of like the perfect partner?
No, it was nothing specific. It was an ultimate feeling. Like, I really want a partner who's my childhood best friend. Like, we can just be silly and goof around all the time. And he wasn't silly in the way that I want my partner to be silly. I don't know. That's such a bad answer.
I mean, no, that makes sense.
It was just the subtle thing.
Well, that's also interesting too, because you were saying how in your partnership that you were in for so long, it felt so kismet and aligned and all of these things. You kept getting validation that he was your person. So it's almost like you were being tested of like, hey, are you going to fall for all of these kismet things again? Or are you going to like actually stay strong to what you want to call in and all the aspects of the relationship that you want, not just the fact that all these things seem like so aligned in kismet?
It was such a subtle and difficult one to pass. And I was like, well, I'm going to be in a magic dark now. And so I just stopped doing all of the things that I had been doing that it made me magnetic. And so I completely fell out of that magic dark.
So what do you think shifted it from not going into the magic dark? Because you had passed the test, or like what sort of energetics were at play for that one?
What had happened was I was in a rut for a while, and then I realized that I was really playing small and just, I in general don't love going out, but I, as much as I am an introvert and I need to recharge by myself, I want a life that's fun.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go to fun things and do fun things. And whenever I do date someone, I am more social. So that's a lot of the reason why I often want a partner to like force me to go out, but like I should be doing that on my own. And so I realized that, and I started, going out and being more social. And that's when I started to get a lot of the tests leading up to that one. And when I passed that one, I was like, okay, well, I'm in my magic dark, so I don't need to do anything anymore. I'm just going to sit at home all the time and wait for this person to come through. Like, I think people, when they hear that, they're like, oh, of course, you're not going to meet someone if you're just sitting at home. And I don't think that's it, because the universe will make crazy things happen.
100%.
So I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is I was playing small. Like, I wasn't doing what my highest self would be doing. And I think that when you do something like jump off of a cliff in some way and it makes you really, really magnetic, when you stop doing the thing that makes you really magnetic, it's going to dampen your magnetism.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense.
So I think that's what's happened.
Yeah, totally. So it was almost like you were on track to maybe go into a magic dark. There's almost a testing period in the magic dark too, of like, cool, now you're going to hear crickets for a little while, but can you stay in your highest magnetic self? I always feel when I go into a magic dark that I really need to be taking the work even more seriously, but also release the pressure of it needing to come in and be like, okay, I just need to continue to like bolster my trust muscle, do things that light me up, do things that excite me, do microscopic things to boost my magnetism and confidence. And it sounds like you were kind of like, cool, it's coming. but you weren't in your power or worth during it. So it's almost like, you got a little more lessons to learn before your manifestation comes through.
And I'm glad that it didn't, because, things kind of took this downturn after that, which sounds like a weird thing to be grateful about. But so many lessons have come up through all of that. I really rock bottomed recently. And I'm so grateful that I did, because there were so many things that I was neglecting or not facing. I feel like it just took me so much deeper. And one thing that I do now that I think is really nice is every morning, the first thing I do when I open my eyes is I make a list of everything that my highest self would do that day. And then at the end of the night, I look at what I actually did that day. And I started doing this maybe a week or two ago, and pretty much day by day, that gap gets more narrow. Basically, what I'm trying to do is bridge the gap between my highest self and the version that I'm living today, so that I can move more in the direction of my highest self.
I love that. That's kind of similar in Up Level, when you're delegating and detoxing all of the things, that gives you a really clear picture of, okay, what needs to go, what needs to change, so you can kind of start making space for new things to come in.
Exactly. Yes.
So how did your manifestations come through? I know, so the item ones are very clear, literally dropping from the sky. But how did some of those other ones sort of come through for you?
The other ones were such, big and less tangible things. The career clarity, that one really took so long for me, because I was so resistant to starting my own business. I remember saying things like a year ago, I just want to be in corporate. I just want to have a job. It sounded so terrifying to me to start my own thing. And I was so hell-bent on staying in this risk-free kind of life that it took so much shadow, some inner child too, for sure, but so much shadow for me to even see this in myself. One thing that really, really helped me was doing my authentic code, but then redoing the authentic code after every time that I did shadow, because there are things on my authentic code now that I would have never put there a year ago, because I was just too shadowy about it. So that really, really helped me. And then just following pings and noting every time I was interested in anything. So what I'm doing now is I'm building an herbal company that'll have herbal powder blends that you can add to smoothies for various things. A lot of it is digestive stuff, because I used to have just atrocious digestive problems. I mean, after I finished law school and I took the bar exam, I spent months just healing my digestive stuff, because by the time I was in law school, I was vomiting every day, every single day without fail.
Wow.
And a big part of how I healed it all ended up being through herbs. And so I really looked at what are the hardships that I faced in my life, and what are the things that I naturally enjoy doing. When I joined TBM, I noticed that I would spend hours a day in the Facebook group answering other people's questions, as though I was being paid to do this. And so I was like, okay, I obviously really, really enjoy helping people, because I'm willing to do that. I just naturally had taken to herbs. And even my first job out of college, I worked in policy, but I would spend most of my day researching herbs and natural cures for things, and all these things that I was really interested in. And so I started putting the puzzle pieces together, and again, just constantly pulling back layers of myself through shadow and inner child, and then redoing the authentic code and seeing where I was naturally interested in. But it took a while for me to even voice this idea out loud, because the market's so saturated and I'm so risk averse. And so I just didn't want it to be this because I was like, well, it's never going to work. There's so many like supplement companies and this and that. But yeah, through a lot of inner work, I finally accepted it in myself. And then I found the right people to talk to about it.
When you finally had that ping of like, oh, it's this herbal supplement company, was there like a very clear kind of when you have like a reprogramming, did you have that aha moment of like, oh shit, this is what the idea is?
Well, a few things happened leading up to it. So right before I had the idea, I got these lymphatic drainage massages every month. And so I was getting my monthly massage from the same people, and we just casually started chatting about like teas and stuff. And she was like, I would love to have our own tea to sell. And I was like, oh, I'm an herbalist. I could actually make that for you. And so that was the first thing. So I started private labeling these teas for them and just loved it so much. I instantly was so excited when that came through. And then this girl reached out to me on Instagram very randomly that she was opening a smoothie place or a juice place and wanted to have an herbal elixir menu too, and asked if I could make that for her. And so I did these two things that really I was enjoying so much. And I kept thinking like, oh, I could just make my own. I love branding and aesthetics, and I would love to create my own packaging and this and that. But there was so much fear around it. And so when I kind of had the idea in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to my brother about this because he works in clean beauty. He has like a clean beauty manufacturing facility, which is so close to supplements. So he has a lot of industry knowledge.
Amazing.
Then I talked to my brother and, I expressed all of my concerns, and he was like, you're really concerned about one competitor here. The market's not that saturated. We can, and he talked me through everything and how to do brand positioning to differentiate myself. And yeah, so that's what I've been working on now.
I think also you had so many expanders. People wanted what you had to offer, and that you had the ability to create it and it be a success. People enjoyed it so much so that another company reached out and wanted to feature in a menu. And then having the biggest expander in your family, that's huge. And I think it's important that people know having those expanders in there simultaneously while unblocking is so, so, so important. And the fact that you were coming from a law background, which is not herbal supplements, and it's so different, but you made that leap. I don't want to say seamlessly because I don't want to take away all of the hard work and inner work and outer work that you put into it, but it's so possible to make those jumps that you're like, these two things don't go together. It's like, but they do. And here's how you can do it. I think that's such an inspiring story.
When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the beginning, I was really tethered to using my degrees because I also have my MBA. I just didn't want it to have been a waste. And then I kind of accepted that maybe I won't use my degrees. I just want to do something where I can help people and I really enjoy it and I can make money doing it. Once I'd kind of divorced that, it's funny this came through. And although, it's not law, it's still, my degrees do affect it. Obviously, my MBA in a more obvious way, building a business, but also with law, there's a lot of legalese, in terms of FDA and FTC compliance. And I don't actually have expertise in those areas, but I really want to find a class or something to take so that we don't have to call up a lawyer every 5 minutes and pay $1,000 an hour to get these answers to questions that I could answer myself. So in a weird way, all of this training does come into play because I think someone without a legal background may not have even thought of FDA and FTC regulations with this idea at all.
100%. And I think it's so cool how when you really do look back, there's no wrong moves, everything forward and everything that you do is ultimately leading you back to your highest self, what you're meant to do. So you might be like, oh my gosh, I, spent all this money and time getting these degrees. Those degrees are what going to set your business apart. And they are what is going to give you the background and knowledge. Whereas had you just jumped into herbalism first, maybe you wouldn't have had that insight and the business couldn't grow in the way that it's supposed to grow for you uniquely. So I always think it's cool going back and connecting the dots and being like, well, if I didn't do that thing that I felt shame around not following through with, or felt shame that I even took that position or job at one time, I actually learned a valuable set of skills there in order to support that next thing coming through.
When I think about this, what I'm doing now, everything feeds into it. This health rock bottom for most of my life and various jobs that I've had, and everything contributed to this.
What would be some insight that you would give someone who is facing those rock bottoms, is having difficulty, finding their career clarity, or is finding difficulty in sort of that unblocking phase to call in partnership? What advice would you have wanted to hear when you started this work, but also that you think others might benefit from hearing now?
The biggest thing, I think, is patience. I think that we tend to want things to come through quickly because we attach a certain meaning to them, like, oh, once I figure out what I want to do with my life, then I'll be happy. Once I have this partner, I'll be happy. It really all comes down to once I have this, once I have that, I'll be happy. Having everything that you want come through is not going to make you happy. So instead of clinging on to these things, definitely, intentionally go after them, but be patient and start to appreciate what's nice in the here and now. Because I think manifestation really is the feminine. It's the feminine energy. It's so much easier to be in the masculine and to like go out and do this and do that. But to really be in your feminine and just gracefully and patiently wait until all the things come through, because they'll all come through at the right time. And no amount of you stressing out about it and freaking out about it is going to make it come through quicker. Like when I first started doing this work, I would just rush through these workshops because I was like, okay, once I get through this, and this, I'll have what I want. And that's not the case. It's just about being honest with yourself, like being really, really honest with yourself about what you want and why you want it, and being willing to let the universe work things out for you while you do all the things that you need to do. I think, to sum it up, really, like Lacey says, be in that deserving state.
I think also owning any shadow that may be coming up of sitting back, doing the work, putting in the actionable steps, but then sitting back and allowing something to come through, clearing any judgment you have against yourself for holding that position and having that faith and grace.
Because there's so much societal programming around, doing things and doing all the things and, working 24/7. And like, we're really programmed that the only way you can have things is by working really, really hard. Like, even think about when you talk to people, everyone always talks about how busy and tired they are because that's kind of valued in our society. So it takes a lot of reprogramming to sever from that. The second big piece of advice I would give is to really, really, really be honest with yourself. I think that anytime we have any sort of reaction to anything, or anytime things are coming up in your life, that's a good place to go digging. And sometimes it's easy to just be like, oh, well, I have a right to be upset about this. So like, it's fine. I don't need to dig into this. Like, I recently have had a lot of things happen where, I'm like, well, I'm rightfully upset. But then I'm like, well, okay, yes, I have a right to be upset about this. But also, why did it happen in the first place? Why am I upset? And then I do digging and I realize there's a shadow there that I need to integrate, or there's a block there that I need to work through. So really, really be super honest with yourself. Like if something is happening in your external world, go inside and see where you need to heal it on the inside.
Yeah, I feel like every single time anything comes up where it's emotionally challenging or like any very, very strong emotion comes up, regardless of how you can like excuse it away to outside circumstances or this has nothing to do with me, whatever. If you go in and do the work, I guarantee you will find some part of your being and subconscious that has work to learn and go through from that circumstance. Every time.
Every time. Like I recently had something where some girl said something really mean to me on Instagram. And so I was upset and, rightfully upset because she said something pretty mean. But then I was like, okay, well, A, why do I care what the stranger said to me? And B, why did she even say it in the first place? Because I don't think it would have happened if the universe didn't want me to pay attention to this area. Mm-hmm. And so I did some digging and all this shadow came up and I quickly reprogrammed it. We have the tools, thanks to Lacey, like we have it all there. So things are going to start being a lot better in your life if you're actually honest with yourself.
I think that's, especially social media nowadays, there is a possibility in which those mean comments either go away or just feel like absolutely nothing. They don't always have to be like, oh, that hurt, that hurt. It's almost in a strange way trying to draw attention to something that can actually benefit you and help you unblock and uncover and accept more of yourself as well.
Exactly.
I think this episode was so, so expansive. I love your story and just, I'm so proud and inspired of how much you're unblocking and uncovering and willing to go in and really, truly do the work and examine yourself. And I think it's one of the hardest and most rewarding things you can truly do.
Thank you so much. This has been really fun. And, I really hope it helps at least one person out there.
It's already helped me. So you already have your one, and I'm sure there's going to be so many others that will be inspired. And thank you so much. And we're just so excited to see what continues to unblock and uncover for you ahead.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.